Hey, Merry Christmas, everybody. It's been a while. I thought I'd come on and do a little cold Christmas special. Because I'm sure you're just like me and you just went through quite a little cold spell. And we've got a long history of this happening. I was looking at the world's oldest religion and the very first monotheistic religion, Zoroastrianism. I can't talk today, has a part in there where Hura Mazda, the god, instructs one of his servants to build a fortification against the Great Frost. So we'll talk about that. Fimblewinter, which is Norse mythology. Fimblewinter is three consecutive winters in a row just before Ragnarok, which is the Norse version of Armageddon, the end of the world. So we'll get into that. And were they talking about a future event when that was written in the prose Edda, or was this a memory of past events? Now, those that I've just described are the big bad events. They come in different sizes, evidently, because you do have more minor ones, which, for lack of a better term, grand solar minimum works to describe the ones that come in the 400 to 800 year cycles, as to where the really bad ones, they seem to be every few thousand years, maybe. I don't get caught up on the exact dates of cycles because I've looked into it and can't find a rhyme or reason to the timing on these things. And then there are the volcanic events. I think those other ones are more related to the sun and external forces. And it seems like the sun has an effect on the seismic and volcanic activity as well. So we'll just dive in right there. And if this guy on screen looks familiar to anybody, that's because this is the Colossus of, I believe, Avignon, somewhere in France. We'll get back to him at the end of the video. Did you guys know that you can go inside of this guy? And it's been a while since I did a video, so just a quick recap in case anybody's new, they can follow along. We have all lived for the last couple hundred years in a relatively stable climate situation, where you can expect certain highs and lows, and this has changed throughout history. 1,000 years ago, you had the medieval warm period, followed by the wolf minimum, where it got colder, then it heated back up for a minute, then it went into the Maunder minimum, which is also known as the Little Ice Age. And then the most recent and well documented was the Dalton minimum of the early 1800s. But the deal is during the Dalton minimum, there were a bunch of volcanoes. There was like 7 years of minor volcanic activity, and then the Mount Tambora eruption. I've also read a lot of articles about them actually finding a volcano that was responsible for the drop of temperatures during the previous Maunder minimum. But in the early 1800s, there was a series of, I think, 7 volcanoes, that, relatively small scale, that they know of. And then in 1815, you had the Mount Tambora eruption that caused a year without summer. So we've been talking about this for a few years, but now with what we just went through this weekend in North America, at least, let's kind of piece together what that actually means with a year without summer, because the winters were really cold, right? Now, I hope you guys fared better than I did. Actually, I had a space heater in my bathroom and it still froze. It actually broke the shower head off where it froze. That's in the old part of the house that hadn't been remodeled yet. But with this dip in the jet stream, this bombogenesis that we got, just a dip in the jet stream, the polar air comes down south. These patterns, will change, and you'll also see that it's going to jump back up to 60 degrees after this, because all of that cold air is going to get sucked back up to the Arctic and pull air up from the south and warm us back up. But it went from being normal cold, 20, 30 degrees, down to -7, I believe, and 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts that, it was still just blowing cold air into my house. A lot of places broke records for the fastest drop in temperature. Denver International went from 42 degrees down to 5 degrees in, an hour? Now imagine this 200 years ago in your drafty Victorian house with 12-foot ceilings. And I know a lot of people on YouTube had the idea that everybody 200 years ago was supposed to be living in log cabins, but if you lived in New York, you had a big fancy Victorian house like this you were trying to keep warm and burning a lot of coal. This is a boiler that used to be in the basement of every large building there was out there that ran these radiator heaters that were upstairs, just so everybody understands the technology of 200 years ago. I'll be really happy when people stop acting like 200 years ago was the Dark Ages. So anybody that lived in a city in a modern house would have been like that. Anyone not living in city and rural areas would have been log cabin style. But that cold we just got did surprise me. I've done a lot of cold weather camping, and that would have been a night that, people would perish from. Because seriously, who's going to be prepared for that? Just dropping 40 degrees all of a sudden. If we didn't have a weather forecast system, that would have caught a lot of people off guard. They actually say that the velocipede, the first bicycle, was invented just after that because all the livestock was dead. Anyway, Mount Tambora eruption, year without summer we all know about, but how bad was that winter? They also call it 1800 and froze to death. Now, let's apply that to modern times, and I got to say that due to the Mount Tambora eruption, it kind of throws shade on the idea that grand solar minimum actually caused the cool down. Like I said, also for the Maunder minimum, they're attributing that to a volcanic eruption. But now let's look at our modern day. Earlier in the year, we had the Hunga-Tonga eruption. And scientists said, hey, this shattered records. It went 37 miles into the air. It sent a shockwave all the way around the world. It blew us away with what happened. But it won't cause any cooling because in our infinite wisdom, we did the math. There wasn't enough sulfur dioxide. It's just water vapor. So we won't have a cooling event. Now, I definitely have no qualifications to speak on the matter. I'm just a YouTuber, but I know what I see with my eyes, and I can recognize a cause and effect. I saw the big Hunga-Tonga eruption earlier, and then I put this video out a few months ago because what I saw was a very cold spring that lasted till about June. We had I think it was longer than that. We had about 45 days of normal warm weather, and then August 15th, it cooled down to 20 degrees below normal temperatures for here. Just on average, of course. But just putting two and two together, looking at how we had a really mild summer directly after, now we're getting this big, huge dip in the jet stream, the bombogenesis, a really cold front. I would say that we're well on our way to collecting data that points to us being in a cooling event due to volcanic activity. It will be interesting to see how the growing seasons of the southern latitudes fare this summer. They're in summer right now. And unfortunately, this is all a very painful, slow, long, drawn-out process, so we'll revisit the subject in another 6 months. Now, let's talk about some history. And YouTube has gone over the rails on some subjects in my mind, and it's Christmas. I'm going to be nice. This World of Antiquity, I recommend his channel. He does a really good take on things, and it's a nice counterbalance from what most people are saying on YouTube these days. Besides, everybody knows that they were trying to pass along the secret of liquid acoustic cymatics here. But I just want to remind everyone that there are inscriptions all over these stones all around the world, and I haven't seen many YouTubers that can actually read Sanskrit and cuneiform. However, anyone willing to put in the work can go to school, learn to be a linguist, and read this for yourselves to make sure that the scholars aren't lying to us. I don't think that they're all in on a big secret of what this says. Now, sure, there may be artifacts out there I'm positive there are artifacts out there that are locked in the bottom of the Smithsonian and whatnot. But the stuff that we do have that's accessible, any scholar can read it. So I do believe the story here because it's carved in stone. Not only that, some of the oldest stone known as civilizations. So I just wanted everyone to understand that. My example there was Akkadian, which is from a little later time period than Zoroastrianism. And they say that this is 4,000 years old and one of the oldest because it's buried under all the other civilizations that came and built on top after they got destroyed by one means or another. But the oldest religion in the world that spanned this whole area of the map. And I'm sure everybody's heard of Derinkuyu, the underground city. Here's a cross section of it. And they had livestock, corrals. They had everything down here. Now, I have heard every explanation that you could possibly think of. Well, there'll probably be some more for how they dug this out, other than saying, well, they took some chisels and hammers and started clawing it out, and you can still see the tool marks here because it's volcanic tuff and it's not that hard of a stone. Have you guys ever had a lava rock fireplace or anything? I mean, you can grind the two stones together in your hand and crack them. It's amazing that all anybody talks about on YouTube anymore is how things were made. What about the people that lived there? I'm sorry, I'm more interested in that. You guys keep talking all you want. It's not that hard. They chiseled it out. The question for me has always been, why did they do this? Not how did they do this? But you can see that at a lot of the tunnels, they've got the Indiana Jones slide the huge rock over thing going on, which definitely indicates that they were defense-minded when they were building this. You balance your rock there to where it doesn't take much to drop it over the door while you're running away. They're thin tunnels. You can only get one or two guys in to fight at a time. It definitely has defensive qualities to it, but part of that is just the nature of a cave. You can only get so many people in at a time. But this has led a lot of academics to say that, well, they built this to get away from invading tribes, this or that. Well, let's look at Zoroastrianism, the first monotheistic religion, the god Ahura Mazda. And that name just sounds to me like a Japanese name from the Sengoku Jidai period, Ahura Mazda, you kill my family. How many people knew that Star Wars was based off of actual warriors from back in the day, the Sengoku Jidai, or the Warring States period, which just happens to be right after the catastrophes of 700 years ago that I keep telling you guys about. Japan fell into that's what developed the samurai culture there. And the Sengoku Jidai is what Star Wars is based off of. See, we're learning all kinds of stuff today, guys. Now, this is a translation, so the syntax is all off from English. There's a lot of typos in this this is from the 1800s, I think, for this translation. But it's between Zarathustra in Persian, Zoroaster in Greek. I don't know why we have different pronunciations in different languages. You guys can pause and read these parts if you want to kind of get a feel for things, but basically Ahura Mazda comes to Zarathustra and basically says, abide by my laws and I will reward you and you'll have kingdoms, and even gave him a golden plow and a golden spear. And keeping in mind that this text is supposed to be 4,000 years old, way back then, he had first 300 kingdoms, then 600 kingdoms. I think he wound up with 900 altogether. Thereupon this earth became full of cattle, beasts of burden, men, dogs, birds, and ruddy burning fires. Then spake Ahura Mazda to, it says Tima here, sometimes it says Yima, it's Zoroaster. Upon the corporal world will the evil of winter come, wherefore a vehement, destroying frost will arise. Upon the world will the evil of winter come, wherefore snow will fall in great abundance on the summits of the mountains, on the breadth of the heights. So God is telling Zoroaster that there's going to be a bad winter coming. Then Yima caused the earth to cleave asunder, a third part greater than before, and then 2/3 and 3/3. There's probably some deeper meaning to the way they word all that. But he is cleaving asunder survival tunnel, maybe? And to there bring thou the seed of the cattle and the beast of burden and of men and dogs. Therefore make thou this circle the length of a race ground to all four corners as a dwelling place for mankind. And for the cows, make a area a length of a race course to all four corners. If you've ever wondered when the first horse race was, it was right as soon as the second horse was born. But for context, I want everybody to understand that 4,000 years ago, we're talking about racetracks, okay? Civilization and all of the things that we do go way back. Now, it might not have been as fancy as what I'm showing here. This is Nero's circus, and the reason I'm showing this is currently, I believe, 6 stories under modern day Rome. It may have been 60 feet. It's been a long time since I read into that. Anyway, that and most old ancient cities have been wiped out multiple times and then rebuilt upon. So going back 4,000 years to the world's first monotheistic religion, they have a story saying that, hey, you better get your butt down in the ground or you're going to freeze. The Bible has its story of the Great Flood. Every mythology of every culture around the world says that we have these big events that come around, except for ours. We are in complete denial. Nope, everything's been exactly how it's been for the last 200 years. And if it changes in the least little bit, then it's our fault, obviously. I ran kind of along with all that, so we'll just touch on Fimblewinter real quick, the Norse mythology. But they speak of a winter coming on lasting 3 years, and this is before Ragnarok, which is technically a fight of the gods. I'd really like to do a deep dive into the etymology of the word God and how we use it, because I've heard multiple old sources that use the word gods for stars in the sky. The one that I can think of off the top of my head is a book called The Smoky God, and it's about hollow earth, and they say that they went inside and there was one central sun that had a haze around it the whole time. So it was the smoky God, but I'm just using that to show that a lot of times they say that gods are in heaven. And in some cases, I think that may be the same as us saying stars in the sky. Now let's mash that all together, and are they saying that it's a war of the stars in the sky instead of the gods in heaven? Now, the thing about this is the Prose Edda was supposed to have been written right at the 13th century, right around the time period I keep saying that there was a great catastrophe. And you can see the after effects in every culture on every continent around the world. I think it's quite possible that they did experience a Fimblewinter type event coming on, and that it was from an older legend of this happening perhaps thousands of years before. Maybe when the gods in heaven get into a fight, then it's all over for mankind. But in their mythology, there was one man, one woman survivor to carry on the race after Ragnarok. And it looks to me that the events of 700 years ago, roughly, were enough to have them write down their traditions in case nobody made it. Anyway, I hope this is all we get of this. If this is from Hunga Tonga, then this will probably, go away in a year or two. But part of the grand solar minimum theory is, and also I should talk more about the magnetic excursion, because that one actually seems to be more accurate to me at this point. You guys can check out Suspicious Observers on that. But if this cold spell lasted another 3 weeks, a lot of people, including myself, would be in a pretty bad spot. Because, like I said, I've already got frozen plumbing, and I had a heater in there. I don't even want to go see what happened under the house. And a last thought on Darren Kuyu is somebody had prior knowledge of that. Now, was this actually God manifesting himself and speaking to Zoroaster? Like Vishnu has incarnated himself as Lord Krishna. God has incarnated himself as Jesus. All of the old mythologies say that somebody told them. Or was it someone with more advanced technology? I mean, we saw this coming. We have modern day weather forecasting. And then the question would be, who was it that had the advanced technology? ETs? Somebody from inside the hollow earth? Which the earth doesn't have to be completely hollow to have a cavern big enough to fit a civilization in. I just want to point out. Better like fish and mushrooms, though, or something. Or it could be, I'm just throwing out different ideas here for a purpose. It could be that there is a lost continent of a civilization that has been here all throughout that never got affected by these. Or, last one, it could have been in the stars. People have been watching the stars since day one, it would appear. And it could be a cycle that, hey, they look at the stars, say, oh, this is going on. Everybody take to the underground. I just wanted to throw out some possibilities because everything I hear now on YouTube is lost technology this, lost technology that. And they're missing a lot of things and ignoring a lot of things, which I'll make a case on later. But I see a lot of people that have just, they're full on in the bandwagon and lost ancient high technology. There's no other explanation for this. Yes, there are other explanations. And now back to the Colossus. If you guys want to act like just because something vaguely resembles something, then that's a petrified whatever it is, go right ahead. But I don't understand where people get mad at me because I don't believe every little thing that somebody on YouTube says. You can still go inside this thing and go into the caverns on the inside and check it out. This is made of stone and plaster, and there's more than one type of plaster, guys. It's not just plaster of Paris. We call it plaster, what we use for stucco, which is a stone mix. It's very hard, very durable. It's been here for hundreds of years. So you guys can believe that this is a fossilized giant, whatever. Don't at me, bro. And I'll do a video on that at some point, that whole subject. But I like the official narrative here better than the YouTube narrative. Because trust me, YouTube has its own narrative about things, not facts or truths. But this was commissioned on a very rich estate. And the reason it was commissioned is because they found a brick tomb 30 feet long, 12 feet wide, and 8 feet high. They opened it and found a skeleton, a human skeleton, 25 feet long, 10 feet wide across the shoulders, and 5 feet deep from the breast to the back. His teeth were about the size of an ox's foot, because everybody knows how big an ox's foot is. But this work was commissioned because they found a giant 25 feet tall on the property. But hey, you don't really even need the Smithsonian to cover this stuff up when you got everybody out there believing that this is an actual petrified giant, do ya? Who's really covering up the truth here? Static out.